So I actually was quite excited to do this one. Excited to do this interview because I've been around the game for a little while, but more in terms of the media side of it rather than the coaching and that side of it.
Right.
And I remember, I feel we chatted for a little bit when, is it Jack Cooper?
Yeah.
When he fought Arthur Saldiak,
Yeah.
MTGP.
Yeah.
That day. And I remember I was chatting to someone afterwards and I went, the strategy and the plan that he had, because Arthur was just smashing people up to before that.
Yeah.
That first round, it was kind of like he did what he was doing before, and Jack, he just calmly, it's like elbowing and he mashed his head up as well.
Yeah.
And I thought, respected that. And there's a strategy and a plan behind it. So I was just kind of got curious about how coaches put those plans together, how coaches keep the fighter aligned, and then Ozzy was one of the ones that he has a very intellectual look at how he does stuff.
Yep.
And then I wanted to kind of tap into it, or for no other reason, for my selfishness, to get to understand it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you commented on that post, and then I looked at some of the stuff that you did, and there's a lot of stuff like I've got questions on how it would work.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, and we talked about it briefly, like some of the stuff you can see work in a business environment, entrepreneur environment. You think, how does that apply to fighting?
Yeah.
So there's a few questions there.
Yeah.
Let's start. So I wrote some questions and stuff that I want to ask you. This is Armour from Television. I'm here with Cadden. Which Cadden? A lot of people that know you as coach, commentator, from what they see on social media. Who are you away from the sport? So when you're not coaching and you're not doing that, who are you as a person?
Interesting question. I'm a dad. I'm a husband. Got strong family beliefs. Loyal, honest, hardworking. Like I say, when you ask people who they are, a lot of the times they give you their job role. That's just one facet to kind of people's identity. When we start talking about identity, we start getting into not necessarily the roles that they play, but more about their values, what their beliefs are. And well, as we were just talking on WhatsApp, one of the things I've got on my WhatsApp is hardest worker in the room. Like one of the things that I always do is I graft, I'll work. And as was it Matt Fraser, the CrossFit guy, says, hard work pays off.
How did you start your journey in terms of Muay Thai and combat sports as well? So what was the thing that pulled you into the gym to start with?
Well, previously I used to play. I played rugby. I played rugby from a really young age, or like 7, 8 years old. And then realizing that I was kind of one of the smaller guys on the rugby pitch. I wanted to kind of toughen up a little bit and stuff like that. Started watching things like Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, Bloodsport, all these kind of iconic 80s and 90s action movies. Loving martial arts, and I initially started off with judo. I did really well at judo alongside my rugby, and it made us into a great tackler when I was playing rugby. I think that degree of access to physicality then led me on to playing these more physical sports and enjoying the combat sports even more. And so it was kind of like a symbiotic relationship where the physicality of rugby was also matched by the technique and fluidity of martial arts, and the two kind of fed each other really well. And that's basically how it then grew. When it had a great career when I was playing judo. Got up to junior brown belt. I was winning like national competitions at brown belt, and well, they were doing it as brown belt and black belt as a advanced category, and I was winning those advanced categories at a national level. I just didn't get my junior black belt because I wasn't particularly good at the set forms and things like that, the katas. Then as I progressed with my rugby, played professional for York. That was my introduction to professional sport and having a professional sports attitude where you're thinking about your strength and conditioning, your rest and recovery, your mindset, the strategy, having people that would give you like tactical advice and being able to play tactical plays. This was like the forging of my martial arts model. And then when I stopped playing, when I lost my 1 year contract playing professionally for York, when they changed from Radial York to York Knights, and then from there I put all my concentration into combat sports and started doing really well in Muay Thai, because I kind of copied that same professional sports mindset and attitude into the sport. And this is, I mean, back then, people weren't really doing strength and conditioning routines. They were just training more, and it was a volume-based training model. Is if you wanted to be good at Thai boxing, do more Thai boxing, and there has to be an understanding of getting the quality reps in. But at some point, it gets to a point of kind of diminishing returns. What's the weakest link in the chain that then starts breaking down? A lot of the time it's down to fitness and cardiovascular fitness and things like that. So once you're then taking a professional sports attitude from strength conditioning, applying that into the sport, this is how we then start attaining these kind of peak performances and being able to get more juice from the squeeze, so to speak.
Do you think that background, obviously you kind of alluded to it, coming from the background from rugby and maybe a different way of them doing the sport, do you think that gave you a bit of an advantage? More of like, in terms of Muay Thai, but also looking at the sport as well, finding little tweaks and stuff that you can kind of build something from?
Yeah. I mean, from a professional sports perspective, I played in numerous positions when I played rugby. One of the positions that I played at fullback, being good at tackling, sat at the back, having to read the movement of where the plays are taking place, understanding if I position myself here, I can cover more area, which then also carries over into Thai boxing when you start thinking, how are you going to ring craft somebody into pinning them into a corner? Yeah. And so you're going from a 100 meter pitch, like 35, 40, 50 meters wide, into a 16-foot boxing ring. Then you start realizing that these smaller nuances to little steps of fencing people out, how to position people so that you give them a hard option, an easy option. 9 times out of 10, people take the easy option and then they're shepherded into doing the right thing. That's how you get ahead of the game.
Yeah. When you look at where you are right now and all the stuff that you achieved, do you wish that the people that knew you knew more about or had a better understanding? What part of you do you think you would like people to have a better understanding of yourself?
I think I do a decent job in kind of getting my message across to people, but maybe because I'm a bit more kind of softly spoken, maybe a little bit long-winded for some people. That softly spoken and long-windedness normally leans into maybe a dismissing ideas because it's not aggressive enough, or they're not getting that like immediate dopamine fix of that's an answer. One of my communication model ideas is I understand that I sometimes take a bit of a long time in order to get to the point. I like talking. I like explaining things, but it's through communication that you get these ideas over. So, I mean, sometimes it's on me to get to my point quicker. Sometimes it's on them to have the patience to accept the idea and understand that there's a lot of levels before you get into that gold dust. So yeah, sometimes there's patience on both sides.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like sometimes when you explain something, you can give the headline,
Yeah,
but then you need to give the context for them to truly understand the headline.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's- yeah,
That's what I don't like about all this clickbait stuff on socials and stuff like that. It's that instant generation. It's that we're in that instant world where people want that immediate dopamine fix, and yeah, it's sometimes a bit frustrating from a coaching perspective, but that's just the way it goes, I suppose.
do you find like you got to balance your, we're talking about coaching and the clickbait stuff and the dopamine hits with also the business part of it? Because when you have, let's say, for example, clients, for PT clients, and you want to do the subtle growth and everything, but you also know that part of them, they want to smack some stuff, they want to do this to get that little bit of a hit.
Yeah.
You find you got to sometimes compromise a little bit just to get the clients in.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, you always want to keep people working. You also have to understand that when you start falling into those like information wormholes, people are going to get cold. So like a lot of the time, I have things kind of either pre-prepared, or I have like information that I'll tell them about, and during the session, like do this particular drill on the bag, but there's a couple of things that I want you to have a look at after the session that's going to add more context to it. So I use like a lot of models from like golden era fighters from Muay Thai, and being able to see how those guys apply a particular technique. It might be something as simple as a jab, simple as a push kick, but when you're getting some of the history models of how people have done it previously. There was one I was looking at the other day. Guy using a push kick. I think he did something like nearly 300 push kicks in a fight. Oh. When you break it down, he was literally doing a push kick nearly every second or every other second of the fight. Because he knew he was up against a really strong boxer, aggressive guy, always coming forwards. And so sometimes you need these extreme models to explain your point.
So you've been like a world champion fighter as well, elite level. What has competing at that elite level taught you that you couldn't probably learn from, let's say, universities or outside of the ring?
Well, I suppose it's the experience. There's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge is knowing it and being able to repeat it, parrot fashion. A lot of academic learning is a lot of the time it is essentially rote style learning, so kind of copy and repeat. Wisdom comes through doing it. So being in the battle, understanding the depth of content that's there, being able to kind of live that experience. So not only is it the ABCs and the academic checklist, it's being able to understand what's the emotional state that people are going through when they're trying to do this, what are the pressures that they're gonna feel, what's the lived experience of doing these drills. And this is one of the things that a lot of people can't they can't explain, because a lot of people haven't been in those situations. I mean, I fought in front of 100,000 people on a king's birthday when I won my second world title. My first world title was beamed to 56 countries around the world on Thai Global Network. Like when there's the eyes on you, the pressure is insane, but it's how you handle that pressure that then kind of differentiates you.
So I could take a picture of your thing there, but I couldn't teach anyone that because I don't have that lived experience.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah,
that kind of sets you apart. Like you just said there, it's fine you explaining to a fighter, or me explaining to a fighter, this is how you handle pressure when you're fighting for a world title. It doesn't mean nothing coming from me,
yeah,
but it
yeah,
would mean so much more coming from someone that, like you just said,
yeah.
fought in
So
front of 100,000 people. You know what I mean?
so for instance, when you're kind of going through this, it's being able to take that headline and people will copy and repeat that headline as essentially rote learning. However, if people are then challenged on that headline, do they have any content below that? A lot of the time they won't, because they don't have the lived experience. But I can give that as kind of the headline, and then I've got all my lived experience of what it feels like sat in the back. Absolute bedlam going on behind the scenes. Hundreds of people around, like a lot busier than normal, and the craziness that went on backstage at the King's birthday was like, it was insane. So being able to explain that, as you say, lived experience, that's the essence to the difference between the two perspectives.
What was it like walking out to 100,000 people?
It was amazing. King's birthday. It was around kind of 10:30 at night. It was dark, but a lot of the crowd had the like little candles with the cardboard cutout, and so like you was looking out, and as you walked out on the runway, we was on a raised runway that was maybe like 4 or 5 foot up. So as you were walking along the runway, you could see, like, as far as you could see, like the crowd just faded out. It was insane, like seeing how many people were there. It was just a sea of these like little candles and glowing faces and stuff like that, until it kind of disappeared out into the trees. The runway was like probably 50, 60 meters long before you got to the ring, and then that was under a big canopy and everything. It was amazing. It was amazing.
What was it like, the fight and to get the win at the end?
The fight, I fought against a Russian guy, Aslanbek Magomedov, and he was fighting out of Rompo gym at the time. Really aggressive guys. He was just looking to box an elbow, and I realised that was his particular style. Worked him out early. Started working my left kick, and just relentless left kick, and started to take away his right cross and his right elbow. Ended up winning on points. It was a great fight, and yeah, when the distance, won on points.
Nice. What was the moment in your fight career where you start changing your mindset in terms of training? So, like, let's say, for example, you've gone the background that you have, and now you're into Muay Thai. I'm quite interested to know, at what point did you start merging your way of training into like how you performed? Does that make sense? Because when you started as a student, so if you walk in through, let's say here, your coach is the one that's telling you what to do. So at what point did you start actually thinking, you know what, maybe we need to do this, maybe we need to do it this way, maybe this style works better, maybe this framework works better?
But I was living that like professional sportsman lifestyle already. It was one of the reasons why I stopped. Well, when I lost my contract playing professionally for York, I went back, had a couple of matches playing at the local amateur team. I was still taking that same like professional mindset towards my training, towards my sporting performance, and so I was making sure that I was in bed like 10 p.m. before every match, I was watching what I was eating. I was doing extra strength conditioning. I was doing extra training outside of the official training. And then when I was playing amateur, I was talking to guys, and they were coming back in after a night on the lash, having a load of beers the night before, having a warmed up kebab for breakfast, and I'm like, we're supposed to be a team. We're supposed to be putting in the same measure of effort, and so that model from professional sport then became my model for life. It's putting in the extra work. It's about ticking the boxes. It's having the discipline in order to do that. So when I carried that mindset and that lifestyle attitude over into combat sports, I think that's why I ramped up literally in maybe 2-3 years. I went from having like my first fight through to English and British title in 2002. I won the English and British title in the same year. Obviously, I was training out of bad company, so high level coaching from Richard Smith and all the guys there. There was a particular bit of a change at that point where there was some of the older guys were just leaving, and there was some new young guys coming through, and I was kind of like stuck in between the two, as the older guys kind of retired and moved on, and the young guys were just coming up. Of those young guys, there was Liam Harrison, Jordan Watson, James France, and like all those guys, they were just kind of starting out. So I felt like a kind of big brother to those guys when we was there, when we was training, and so my work ethic, I was then kind of passing on to those guys, and I mean there was a bit of piss take at the time and stuff like that because of my kind of dedication towards diet, nutrition and things like that. I mean they were like, back then they were like 12, 13, 14 years old. They were taking the mick out of me because I was taking a box of grapes to the cinema. They were smashing burgers and popcorn and everything. Metabolism gets them away with it, but as those guys have grown up, they took it a little bit more seriously, and then they were like, oh, maybe Cadden was on something then. And it's been one of those where we've just kind of grown up together. We're just a little bit kind of ahead of the curve.
Do you think it's important, like how you dedicate yourself to, let's say, the sport, and how you dedicate yourself outside should mirror? Like, I tell you what I mean is, whenever you do something outside, you have it to the same dedication, the same intensity, and then what you do in the sport, it's got to be mirror to it. Like, for example, you couldn't be super disciplined as a Muay Thai fighter and then be completely the opposite when you're outside. And I'm not talking about nutrition, but you know, like how stuff you do at home, even like the gardening and things like this, if you have that discipline and that regimen and say, you know, I'm going to be like this all the way through, do you think that plays a part in that person's psyche?
Yeah. You say that these are two different beings. Like literally, you're doing that with your hands. Like, I don't separate the two. You live the values as we were saying right at the start. It's your values and your lifestyle attitudes that then dictate your pathway. There's a really famous quote. I think it was Socrates that says, "We don't rise to the level of our expectation. We fall to the level of our habits." So, if your lifestyle habits outside of each particular environment are sloppy, then that's why you're not going to achieve those kind of levels. But if you're disciplined in one particular area, then it's being able to roll that out, and how you do anything, how you do everything. So yeah, the two link together. There's no separation.
Looking back at your fights, what's the toughest fight you had, and what did you realize about yourself as an athlete during that fight?
Probably the toughest one has to be against Chanrit, the first Thai that I fought. I think I'd just won the English title at that point. I was 62 kilos. He was a 61 kilo Rajdamnern Stadium champion. It was my 12th fight. It was his probably 150, 200th. And yeah, before this fight, I thought I'd felt the most power that a 62 kilo fighter could generate. And so therefore it was more about a game of skill and strategy and setup and creation. I was so wrong. I got an education that day. I hadn't felt the most power that a 62 kilo fighter could generate. There were leagues above that. I was essentially playing Sunday league football, and I was then experienced into like what it's like in the Premiership. It was literally night and day. The very first kick that kicked me moved me a foot sideways. I was like, this is different gravy. This is different level. From the first 2 or 3 interactions, I think it was one of the first times that my coach, Richard Smith, had asked the corner man, pass me the towel. Don't know when, but I might have to throw the towel in. You know, Richard Smith's famed for never throwing in the towel with his guys. If you're in there, you're in there for a fight. You're in there for a reason. I think every fighter with any degree of great heart determination would rather go out on their shield than have someone quit on them. Yeah, like when you're in a fight, it's never going to be easy. It's always going to be tough. You expect it to be tough, but when you're taking it to those kind of levels, even on that very first interaction, I think it was a little bit concerning, and he was looking after my health. I managed to go the furthest with Chanrit. He had like 3 or 4 fights in the UK. I was the only one to fight him under full Muay Thai rules. Which was 5 3-minute rounds, elbows and knees to the head. Everyone else he fought 5-2s against, no elbows, no knees to the head. I went the longest with him into the second, like almost to the end of the second round. He gave me an absolute whooping. He broke my sternum with. He dropped me 3 times, twice with body shots, and then third one was with a knee. The footage is on YouTube, and it was like I say, it was an education. That was on the Sunday, on the Sunday night. On the Monday night, I was back in the gym. I was like, when can I fight him again? And everyone was like looking around, like, dear God, like, are you serious? You took an absolute kicking yesterday. Like, what don't you understand? It was like he hadn't stolen my soul. He hadn't stolen that fire inside of me. And sometimes fighters need to be saved from their own bravery, bordering stupidity. But like I say, he hadn't stolen my soul. He hadn't stolen that fire in the pit of my stomach. It was a great learning experience. And I say, if you're gonna go into the big wide ocean, you have to be ready for those big sharks. And that was it. That was the experience.
What did you do after that in terms of training and stuff to level up yourself?
Carried on.
Why do you think there's such a big difference between, let's say, like, for example, say if you look at 62 kg, you said, right, and you think this is how much power they should generate. Why do you think there's a significant difference in power in terms of what they can generate? Is that experience? What do you think is the reason?
Experience, training volume, neurological programming, coordination, relaxation, how we process the mechanics, how relaxed you can be under pressure. There's a whole host of factors. But then also understanding the balance and the nuance of how you turn your hip, how you throw the kick, how you deliver the punch, whereas what's the tension that's required through the kinetic chain all the way through to the floor into your footwork. But once you've learned that kinetic chain all the way from the impact point all the way through your body back to your footwork, what are the other things that you can then turn off so that you can allow more freedom of movement and more whip, more power generation? And so there's both sides. Not only is the activation side of that kinetic pathway, but it's also the relaxation side to allow the freedom of movement and the explosiveness to be delivered.
So you coach now for a significant amount of time. You've got thousands of hours of coaching. When you've got a fighter that you think you want to develop, if this person's going to be like a big star, world champion or whatever, what kind of things are you looking for in them in terms of behaviors and training and mentality?
All of a sudden, some of my students are popping up into my mind. Oh, what does he do? What does he do? One of the things that I like to do is give models. I've got some on the board here. I've got some up on my strength and conditioning board up at the far end. It's feeding them with enough information to keep their interest ignited, but then also allowing them to grow, allowing them to run with it. I, as a coach, I shouldn't be the one going on and saying, "Why are you not at training?" Yeah, it's like the people that are gonna make it, they'll literally live in the gym. Like every night of the week, they turn up like automatically, and it feels weird when they're not there. They said when I find these people, it's they start kind of, they'll fly under the radar for quite a while. A lot of the time they fly under the radar for while they're kind of finding their feet. Then all of a sudden it's like, "Yeah, evening, you all right?" And then like every day, they're always there. There's I share there's a little meme that went out, I think it was either this week or last week, with Islam Makhachev saying that the only way that people can beat us is when they train more than us. No one trains more than us. Well, this is what I deal with the guys. As I said to the guys, like yeah, like I expect you to be there. If you don't want to be there, it's your choice. But like hard work pays off. That grind, that commitment pays off. You've got to put in the work.
When you're like, let's say, building a fighter, what do you think is the first block that needs to be put in place? Is it the physicality or the mentality of that individual?
The mindset. 100% mindset. Like, not only from a positive perspective, but also from a negative perspective as well. Being able to differentiate between the two. So what are the good habits that they've got? What are the bad habits they've got? Is there, sometimes there's like past history. They might have negative things that have gone on in their life, and they're like redirecting that negative energy and putting it into something positive. Okay, that's where we run. That's why we light that fire. We blow on that fire. We light that spark. We ignite that spark. We start nurturing that spark, and then all of a sudden it's a little fire, and then it's building up, and then it's an inferno. Then it's a self-feeding mechanism. The more they train, the bigger the fire grows.
So I got a question. Obviously, when I was coming down on the train, I watched your TED talk, and you mentioned NLP, right?
Yeah.
And I like the idea of that. And what was it? Maybe you could explain it a little bit to those people that don't know what it is. But what I find quite interesting, or what I wanted to ask you, was how do you put like that into training? Because like when you're padding and stuff like that, there isn't the linguistical part of it. A lot of that conversation is internal. So how do you have that how do you instill that into those fighters that you're building? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so from a NLP perspective, NLP stands for neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro to do with the brain, linguistic is the language that we use, and programs are the systems that we've got in order to achieve a particular task. Now, when people are doing a particular task, as a pad holder, I'm looking in their eyes, I'm reading them all the time. A lot of the time, you start seeing like little eye rolls, little dip of the head, little knocks of confidence. Sometimes they need that little nurture. Sometimes they need the arm around the shoulder. Sometimes they need the discipline and saying, come on, hard, let's go. Sometimes they need the positive encouragement. And that's a judgment call that comes through hours and hours of training, hours and hours of coaching in order to help people get them to where they want to be. After normally we'll just kind of run through the paths and I'll give them the either kind of positive encouragement or maybe a more negative provocation to encourage them to hit harder and be a little bit more aggressive and kind of draw them out, give them the agency, give them the opportunity to grow. Say that it's okay to make a noise, it's okay to hit hard. Like when we're doing drills, sometimes it is like they'll lift up a push kick and they'll just touch it on my stomach. It's like, if you're gonna push kick, come on, let's go. Like I want to get that sensation. Then I get a little bit of adrenaline in my system. Then my performance starts ramping up. So it's not only is it how to nurture their performance, it's having this self-awareness of how I'm going to respond. So then I deliver the technique correctly because we're both working together.
No, I understand it.
Yeah. So sometimes it needs that little bit of a kind of stress response in order to fire me up a little bit, to know that I'll then start delivering the technique a little bit faster with a little bit more authority. And then they go, oh, wow, that's how it's supposed to be done. Not in the kind of sanitized, choreographed models that a lot of the time you get.
That's interesting. Because I was looking at it from, let's say, just the fighter's perspective, but you make a valid point that the energy is both ways.
Yeah.
And the pad holder, because the pad holder actually benefits from that positive energy as well.
Yeah.
And it's mirrored back, and then both of them are elevating the game.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you seen the movie The Celestine Prophecy?
I'm not seeing that.
So in the movie, in the Celestine Prophecy, there's I think it's like a monk kind of observing these two people talking, and this monk is supposed to be in an energetic state where he can see people's energy, and he's looking over at these two people, and they're having a conversation, and they've both got these kind of upward spirals, and then he looks at another conversation. And there's a person that's kind of bright and glowing. The other person's a little bit flatter, and then all of a sudden the other person, the light kind of energetic guy, is getting his energy kind of dropped down. I mean, I'm sure you know people that you meet and they're like, that was hard work. Yeah, and this is when we start talking about these kind of almost energetic states, and it's hard to convert between the linguistics and the language and the energy and the communication between something like academic and something that then becomes a little bit more spiritual, a little bit more esoteric. And because when these things become a bit more spiritual and esoteric and a bit more woo, people then start dismissing it as, oh, that's just a bunch of kind of hippie talk. It's a kind of, right, okay, well, how do I copy that? How do I put that into process? And it's the crossover between these like energetic states and what information you're offering out to then turn that and flip that into something that's a little bit more kind of tangible, where people can then kind of emulate and model these performance metrics.
Nice. When you're looking at a fighter, how do you separate the instinct of a fighter to a strategy as well? So let's say you have a fight, you're working with a fighter, they've got a big fight coming up. They have instincts that get them to do certain things. How do you connect the two? Like, for example, tell you what I mean is, say you decide, and I'm being very crude here, you turn around and you said, you want to work a lot of low kicks in this fight, but the fighter is used to chucking that left kick, right? And that's just instinctual, he's got to do that. How do you change their instincts or adapt their instincts to fit a game plan? Or can you do that?
I mean, yes, you can. It's just how much stimulus from a coaching perspective you have to offer. Sometimes there's a time and a place to explain that to the fighter. There's a time and a place to just do it with the fighter, so they don't realize that they're being coached at the same time. Yeah, so there's some sneaky coaching tricks in there. Sometimes you tell them what you want them to do. Sometimes you deliver the same technique. You give them the advice of the particular technique that you want them to throw, and then you just keep throwing that same shot, and you get them to program that one counteraction. So sometimes it depends on the particular fighter's like fight IQ, and their like emotional state. So sometimes people like to think that they've got the answer. Sometimes you need to hold them back from the answer that they think is right, rather than get them to do the thing that you know is right. And this is where fight experience pays off.
Is there a bit where you got to allow them to find that answer themselves? So you might know that this is how you should do it.
Yeah.
But you also know if I tell them, it's not going to have the same impact as them going through a path and getting there in the end themselves.
Yeah. So then I'll just counter it. Yeah. Give them the experience. You get the two ways of coaching. You can do it the easy way and listen. You can do it the hard way and have the experience. But as we were talking earlier, this is the difference between knowledge and wisdom. The knowledge is listening and knowing the right answer. It's like copy and repeat. Wisdom is having the experience. That's what happens when I do the wrong thing. So this is how we play.
I like it. It makes sense. I was like I said, I interviewed Ozzy, and Ozzy was saying about like the habits and what you were saying here about the habits, and get that into training right now. He said because you can't put those habits when the person's in the cage or the ring.
No, that's too late.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what he says. There's no point now saying I want you to do this. It's too late. That's what they are. Just do the best you can with them right at that moment in time. Quite interesting. Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, from a coaching perspective, it's never just one thing. You don't tell the fighter just to do one thing. You need to have multiple layers of strategy, multiple layers of defense.
Do you do that? Like, so when you've got a fighter, we talked about maybe somebody coming in and you're looking at things that you want to see, and like, I mean, the question that was asked earlier is when you have a fighter and you want to see where you can develop them, certain traits that you want to have. When you've got someone and they're on that trajectory now, they're starting to go from N class, C class, B class, and they're starting to win titles and stuff like that. Do you look at them now and just thinking, all right, cool, now I've got to add this layer, now I've got to add this layer, now I've got to add this layer, rather than looking at fight by fight, where you're looking at the growth of that individual, regardless of what they're winning and the accolades they're getting?
Yeah. I look at the growth of the individual as opposed to too much of a tailored response. I don't look at it as a fight by fight thing. Like if they win, they win. If they lose, they've got opportunity to learn. If they win, if their mindset is in the right place, they'll also learn from the winning as well. So it's just a learning process. There's a famous saying that records are for DJs. Okay, leave that to the DJs. Yeah, because at the end of the day, we need to have the emotional maturity and emotional integrity to say, regardless of the win or the loss, are you happy with your performance? Probably one of my proudest moments just recently with one of my fighters is that he went into the fight. There was a bit of a muck up in the fight. He had a bit of a muck up with the weigh-in. Ended up giving away like probably 5-6 kilos in weight. We still took the fight. He's an absolute warrior. He put on a fantastic performance. He lost the fight, but when the final bell rung, he came back to his corner. He gave me his gum shield. I gave him a hug, gave him a pat on the back, and he smiled. He nodded at me. He was like, "I'm proud with that." Before the result was announced, for me, that was an amazing measure of maturity in that guy's performance, because he wasn't basing his success on the finite result. And that's why it's sometimes a bit hard for people that are outside the sport to understand that there's growth of the individual, and just because it's a loss doesn't mean that it's a dull event. I've had fights where I've knocked the guy out in the first round, and it's just been, and to the spectators, it's like, wow, that was amazing, that was fantastic, and I haven't been that like emotionally engaged. Like, yeah. And it was kind of I always say that first round knockouts are an athletic display because there hasn't been a challenge. I've got fights that I've lost, but I'm really proud of the performance because it drew the very best out of me. I might have lost the fight, okay. Like, there's always going to be the win and lose situation, but don't win and lose the opportunity to grow as an individual. And so this is when refer back to the poem "If" by Rudyard Kipling, where like the saying about wins and losses, like don't let the win go to your head, don't let the loss go to your heart. Like there's so many different ideas around winning and losing that yes, it's something to deal with, but a lot of the time those things are ego based, not like personal integrity based.
So like a lot of the fighters coming up, they're young, and they're coming from the social media world right now. How do you protect them from that, and in terms of having that mentality? Because whereas that world wants the accolades and they want this, but that little moment that you said there, so special, he didn't get the win, but he was happy in his own ability. How do you balance that? How do you get that version, which is actually beneficial to the individual, then get the ones where you're doing it for the likes?
Well, I think it's like for me as a coach, I'm always going to put my lads in for challenging fights that are going to make them grow. I have confidence in my coaching. I have confidence in my guys. That's why we work together and we go towards a fight. If I wasn't confident in my coaching, then I would always make sure that my fighters were always had the more experience. They had a better record. It was like already a 70-30 fight in our favour because I don't have the confidence to have the challenge. Like there has to be that experience, and that's how people grow. People grow through challenge. But in order to protect them from social media, like they're going to use social media anyway. And I can give advice, I can give guidance, I can point them in the right direction. You just say, well, I came from a time when there was no social media, there was no YouTube to check out what your opponent even looked like. But now everyone wants to be on a poster, everyone wants the bespoke like one-on-one face-off with their opponent. And yeah, okay, it's great for selling tickets, but Don't fall into that negative hole of, I need to see what this guy's doing, because then I'm already in a losing mindset. Winners focus on winning. Losers look at winners. So do you want to be a winner and focus on yourself? Or do you want to be a loser and be looking at your opponent and giving him the win energetically already?
What would you say separates a good fight plan to a great one?
I think from a good fight plan is going to have foundational movements. A great fight plan would be to have the immediate answer for that one particular thing that your opponent's doing. So, for instance, if we have a look at, let me think, Conor McGregor Aldo, like that was such, like at the time, it was the most highly publicized fight worldwide. They did a worldwide tour. Conor McGregor was able to get into his head, and he was already getting under his skin. And every time Conor was provoking him, Aldo was doing this. He was twitching. He could start to read that little twitch. And so they knew, like, when push comes to shove, right, okay, Conor's at one side of the cage, Aldo's at the other side of the cage. He knew the first thing that he was going to do was throw that left hand, throw the right hand. So then Conor was there ready and sparked and starched him in 13 seconds. Yeah. Because it's the great fight plan is that it all came into alignment. And I think that only really happened because they spent so much time together, and Conor was able to get kind of under his skin.
We talked about frameworks. You're talking about frameworks. Do you have like frameworks for different opponents? So, for example, if you've got a fighter that's fighting someone tall, do you turn around to, let's say, that fighter that worked this framework for the taller opponent, or you got someone that's more a puncher? Do you have the different frameworks?
Yeah. So we're here at Chalk D. We have like 4 or 5 different strategies, depending on, and we do one strategy per month. So for our like 2 main Muay Thai technique classes, all we'll do that month is drill that one particular fight strategy. Yeah. So over the first like 4 months, you're getting a good body of work where you visit every single one of those strategies. Over 8 months, then you're doing it twice. Over the year, you get to visit that same strategy 3 times. This is how you're upskilling everybody all at the same time. And as they say, the rising tide lifts all ships.
If you've got a fighter that has a bit of a negative mindset, so we were talking about how you're padding someone and it seems like they're a little bit negative, like, I'm never going to get this, I'm never going to get that. What do you do? What's the actions that you do to kind of switch that around and get them to start getting more positive and address those type of things?
You challenge it. Or speak it out. As Jordan Peterson said, you go to the dragon's lair. You go to where the insecurity is. You don't wait for that insecurity and hope that it goes away. Mm-hmm. You go to the dragon's lair. You confront it. You face it. You face that demon. You face that fear, that insecurity. And as soon as you start facing those insecurities, a lot of the time, like 99.9% of the time, those insecurities crumble under pressure. Those insecurities crumble under scrutiny. Because negative energy is weak. That's my lived experience. And as soon as I start calling these things out and start challenging these things, people then go, oh wow, okay. This is where the small small differences make the big difference.
Do you think that's where your NLP comes in a little bit, where you're having that conversation and you're drilling right down to where that negativity lives?
Yeah.
Because that conversation's happening where you can't see it.
Yeah.
And you're seeing a little bit of it, and then you dig it down to find it, and then you're confronting it straight there, and you're changing that mindset, the way they talk to each other. I find that quite interesting.
Even like, for instance, when was the last time you skipped?
It's a while.
Yeah. The first time we get people skipping, that failure and how people talk to themselves on that first frustration, right out, like, oh, if I talk to you the way that you're talking to yourself right now, would we be friends? Probably not. Because people are always mean to themselves. But as soon as you start reframing those, those dialogues, those conversations, those verbal loops, we break the loop. As soon as we break the loop, then that's when the magic can start happening, because then you fall into like a void space. Then people don't know what to say to themselves. They just get on and do it.
What was the hardest lesson you learned that elevated your performance?
Do what, sorry?
The hardest lesson that you felt you had to learn to elevate yourself to elite level?
Probably belief. Back in 2006, for Ashley Gishard, he was a multiple world champion. It was a multiple world champion before I even started. It was on the posters at the gym. It was a legendary name. When I won my English title, he was stood next to my girlfriend at the time, and he gave her a little nudge. She was like, "He's good, him." She told me that. I was buzzing. I was like a little school kid. Ashley Gishard said I was good, and then, like, 4 years later, I'm facing him at his own hometown show in Altrincham. Ashley Gishard, he'd fought Dida Diafat. He beat Dida Diafat in France. Dida Diafat had beaten Ramon Dekkers twice. So when you're fighting the guy that beat Ramon Dekkers twice, you know you got your work cut out. You're in for a rough night. I was absolutely crapping myself before this fight. I was so nervous before this fight because he was such a legendary name beforehand. I'd been looking up to him for so long. He was an amazing fighter, and it was in that fight that I just couldn't let my technique go. I couldn't have an answer. I was too scared to take that step. Richard Smith saw this. He saw it in the corner. He came back after the second round. He was like, "Oh, what you so scared about? Like, you've taken his biggest shots now. Like, why aren't you throwing? Why aren't you engaging in the fight? You're better than this." And the one thing that he said to me is, he said, "I want you to believe in yourself the way that we believe in you."
Oh.
And man, I'm getting choked up just saying that now. That was pivotal. It's like, and I think within that fight, I then went out. That's when I kind of stepped into my matrix. I then started to let my techniques go. I started to enjoy myself, started having fun in the fight. Ended up winning on points. And I think that was kind of like it almost felt like a changing of the guard. Like, Ashley came up to us afterwards. He was like really respectful and it was like, well done. And we've had some good chats. We're good mates now. Yeah, it was that changing literally in the moment. A lot of the time, these things take time and time and time and time. But I think because that was such a pivot, so quickly, literally in the space of a minute, that minute between rounds. That 1 minute, that one phrase changed the trajectory.
That's amazing. What do you think is the toughest lesson or the hardest lesson your fighters would take them the longest to learn?
Sometimes I think it's what's the key that it takes to unlock the lock. So it's not necessarily about the time, because this is when we start getting deep and philosophical. Because time's a construct. Time only comes from understanding how atoms decay. So time isn't really a thing, it's just a metric that we use. So change for an individual can happen instantaneously. Sometimes these things happen really quick. I've seen some amazing things happen as a therapist, as an NLP mind coach. I've seen people come in being absolutely petrified, but then go out and then face their fear. I've been able to do that in 20 minutes. The question is that how well defined is the fear? How well defined is the insecurity? How well defined is the issue? How deeply programmed is that issue? And then what's the magic spell? What's the magic words that are required in order to unlock the lock? So I don't necessarily think that it's a time thing. It's a linguistic thing.
There's a lot of information out there in the world. We've kind of touched on social media and stuff, and there's all these fad exercises and training regimes and stuff like that. How do you, because there's always knowledge out there that you can get and you can add and you can grow as an individual, even as a coach. How do you kind of wade through that and pull out the actual gems, or how do you take out the rubbish and just put what you need in terms of training and teaching?
Spot science. I'll always lean into the science. I'll always lean into the what's the energy systems that are being used? What are the mechanics that are being used? How's the body being used in order to bulletproof the system so that they can then do the drill, the sport better, faster, harder. Like I say, there's some BS out there, but having a coach that's not only done the work and been to that elite level, but then also having the academics alongside it, then you can start merging the two ideas together. And then obviously I've got networks throughout the fitness industry. I've been doing martial arts now for 42 years. I know I don't look it. But then also adding in this like academic rote learning idea of being able to read scientific papers, like scientific studies and things like that. You start understanding that, yeah, okay, something might look cool for the gram, but then is it going to carry over into a usable metric that's actually kind of shifting the dial?
Coming back to the idea of building a fighter, what would you say is the core unshakable principles or the unshakable pillars that fighter needs to have, like a foundation that they must have to be elite level?
Be coachable, mindset, have basic athleticism, and proprioception, know where their body is in space. That carries over with the basic athleticism stuff anyway. Being able to improve your vestibular system, your balance system, so that everything that they're doing is imbalanced, and therefore being able to execute the technique that they're being told to do. But this is how I kind of model the mindset idea as our foundation. Basic athleticism at the second layer, sport specific skill at the third layer, but then the cherry on the top is the X factor. The X factor is kind of how the individual puts it together, whether they're introverted, whether they're extroverted, how they want to kind of express themselves. And there's going to be things that are Instagram friendly. There's going to be things that are that maybe aren't. And it's just how well that individual can then kind of market themselves around these ideas.
Sorry, do you think there's a part where you could take a fighter up to a certain point, but then all you could do is create the environment for them to take it, because they have to be at a certain level? Like when you're talking about elite level, it's very much about their mindset, which is internal.
Yeah.
So you could create that environment, but it is down to them ultimately to take that step.
Yeah. So I mean, it's always down to them. I'm a coach. I'm there to give information. If I'm giving information, it's up to them to receive it. So therefore, it's not necessarily how well I can explain things. It's down to because if they're not explaining it, then I'm not being a good coach. So I take the responsibility over my linguistic flexibility to be able to explain these things in many different ways, but also if I can if I can trigger a bit of humor in there, a bit of a shock value in there, something that's going to get an emotional response, then that emotional response is going to sit with them more than the data is. And so there's a crossover between the getting the emotion and getting the facts in there.
Cool. You have a very analytical mind. That's very clear. It's come across in terms of the interview so far. How do you use that when you develop it yourself as a fighter, and when you're developing fighters as well? How do you use that? What kind of things are you looking for? I tell you what, the question I want to know is, how valuable is that analytical mind? Because you talked about stuff that you do anyway.
Yeah.
But how valuable is that as an asset to a coach?
Well, from my perspective as a coach, this is why sometimes you get good fighters that don't necessarily make good coaches, because you need to have the linguistic skills and explanation skills in order to pass that idea over. One of the ideas that I always kind of push it is that there's a difference between being a coach and being a padman, a trainer. A trainer will then can just kind of run you through pad work, but they don't understand maybe they don't have the understanding or explanation in order to kind of get that point across.
Yeah.
So from a coaching perspective, in order to bring that model together, you need to be able to see the big picture before we can focus on the detail. I'd rather focus on the big picture first, and then you've got a skeleton to hang that information on. A lot of the time, people are taught like scavengers, hit what's ever in front of you. But what I like to do when giving these models means that people can then choose what they want to eat as an apex predator. So I'd rather nurture a load of apex predators so that they're choosing how they're going to take their opponent apart, rather than being a scavenger and hit what's ever in front of them. And again, see how that kind of comes back to the mindset of where we sit on the emotional food chain. You're either a scavenger or you're an apex predator.
What would you like your fighters to take into the world from training here? So that training with you, your mindset, just being around you, what would you like them to take into the world?
Be kind, but carry a big stick. I think that's is it Teddy Roosevelt? I think that was Theodore Roosevelt that said that. Be kind, but carry a big stick. So you can be nice. You don't need to be going around clashing heads with people all the time. You don't need to be egotistical. You don't need to be aggressive. But if a problem comes to your door, you've got the confidence to deal with it. So it's not always about competition. It's an attitude that you're willing to step up when the situation arises.
It's like that quote, and there's a quote I read where it's you'd rather be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war.
Yeah. So when we're taking that idea, it's like be prepared, like be a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Be prepared, have the tools, have the skills, but you only learn the skills by hours and hours of preparation. Yeah.
When you're all said and done, and you decided, like, gonna go and retire now, get a garden somewhere and some tea bags or something, right? What would you like to be remembered by from the sport? I'm not just talking about the wins in your fight career. What would you like Muay Thai in the UK to remember you for?
Hardworking, nice guy. I've always been the nice guy. I've always been softly spoken. Some people have taken that kindness for weakness. I think a lot of the time when I was fighting, people underestimated me because of how I kind of portray myself, how I talk. I've always kind of softly spoken. I'm always like to think that I'm eloquent and I explain myself well. But because I'm not effing and jeffing and swearing all the time doesn't mean that I don't have that like inner animal that will bite back.
Yeah.
So it's just, yeah, be a nice guy.
So with everything that's this journey that you've been on, from you switching from rugby down to Muay Thai to judo and all the rest of it and everything, and then fighting on the King's birthday 100,000 and the book that you written, that you did a lot of hard work, are you proud of yourself?
Yes, 100%. I worked hard for this. I know I've worked hard for this. I pour my life and soul into this. And it's one of those things where giving is a flow trigger. I give all the time. And yeah, okay, you come across those people that are takers and they'll take the piss at the same time, try and take advantage. But in essence, it's never really taken advantage. That says more about them than it does about me. I'm in the giving mode. I'm in coaching mode. Like 99% of the time, I'm always in a giving mode. So I'm proud of what I do, and some people try to take advantage, but that's more about them than it is about me.
Normally, that's my last question. However, I've got one more because it follows up onto your giving mode. Talk to me about the book. Talk to me about why you wrote the book, and I very much would like people to understand the effort and the dedication you spent to actually creating that book.
Yeah, so the book came from a newsletter that we had back in COVID. It was something that I was still trying to deliver content, trying to deliver information. Obviously, we couldn't have the face-to-face classes, and so I was writing these newsletters and giving information from a sport psychology perspective and sharing some of my own personal stories at the same time. How the academic science fits with my personal story, and yeah, I was just sending out all these different newsletters. Then I was reading a book at the time called Chasing Excellence by Ben Bergeron. He's a CrossFit coach, and he used to work on Wall Street. He was a business guy to start with before he started CrossFit, and a lot of the like any kind of engineering skill and management skill and things like that kind of carried over into sport. So much so that when I was reading the book, I was saying, well, the stuff that I'm reading in the book was looking at very similar to the stuff that I was sending out in the newsletter, and I was like, well, let's take that body of work that I've already got, and let's see if we can construct that and put it into a book the same as Ben's done. So yeah, I started to write. I was beavering away in the office down there for months on end. It was a bit of a labour of love, to be honest. And it went from like 8,000 words of the newsletters that I already had to around 30,000 words to kind of pre-frame the information, explain some of the stories that went alongside it, and then add some like follow-up information and maybe some questions to ask and maybe some signposting for extra information of how people can follow up on different ideas if they so wish. It took around 5 years to get to print. Obviously there was plenty of dead time in there because priorities kind of take over, and running classes and personal training and everything else that I had going on. But I eventually got through it, and I got to a point where I was able to send it off to the publishers, and I've released it this year, start of this year. So yeah, then we had the big book launch, and it's a story of linking academic science and some studies around that of how I've then applied the academic science into my personal life experience of fighting in Muay Thai, climbing the ladder and going through like a Maslow's hierarchy of needs idea, all the way through to measuring elite performance. So how I stayed at the UK #1 for like 8 years. What are my kind of flow state triggers? How can I nurture more flow in my life? Because flow state it's an emotional state, the same as happiness, sadness, anger, grief. Flow is a positive emotional state that everyone experiences it every day in these like small segments. You know, like when you kind of lose track of time. They said this is part of a flow trigger is when part of your brain starts switching off, losing track of time, losing track of yourself, and you drop into that mode where you're just happy to express yourself in your purest form. That's where flow happens its best. And yeah, that's part of the story, and there's a whole host of other information laid in behind that. And yeah, I'm sure you'll enjoy it when you buy it.
How can someone buy it?
Drop us a message. I've got some copies here at the gym. Drop me a message and we can sort that out.
Cool, excellent. Good. I enjoyed this.
Thank you very much.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
No problem.
Yeah.